Hello and welcome to episode 19, When You Want to Want More Sex.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Hello and welcome back. So this is going to be part 2 to the last episode, The Secrets to a Mutually Satisfying Sex Life in Long-Term Relationships. I just wanted a different title, so I gave it a different title, but it's just the carry on from that episode. So if you haven't listened to that episode, you probably want to catch up before you head on to this one. Now, it is the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, and I had an amazing Christmas day, even though I had no children for the first time, kind of ever. Both of my children are overseas and living their best life. And so we went to my brother and sister-in-law on the river. Amazing venue. And had the whole family there. We were there for lunch and for dinner. Started out with some seafood, so some beautiful prawns and some oysters, and it was a bit of a warm day, so then we threw our suits on and jumped in the river for a bit of respite from the heat. That was fabulous, and just had the most beautiful catch up with friends and family. And then the second part of the Christmas celebrations were later in the afternoon when more of the family could come because, everyone has to share their time around with all of their family members. So we ended up finishing up at about 9:30 last night and coming home. It was just beautiful. Ended the night sitting down on the dock that they have down in front of the property onto the river, and all of our legs in the river, and just sitting around enjoying some beautiful conversation and the beautiful evening. It was just really fantastic. Good food, good company. Even had a couple glasses of wine, enjoyed some Sauv Blanc, and enjoyed every single little taste of it. It was great. And that's all I needed. That was fabulous. So yeah, here we are. It is another stinking hot day today, but I'm not going to complain. I got up early, not as early as I normally do, so I had a pretty good sleep, but I was out for a walk at about 6:30 this morning, and some beautiful breeze before the heat really was sinking in. So I got out, got my exercise, and decided to get this recording done today because I'm heading off tomorrow night to Melbourne to see my daughter, who is flying in, has a layover in Melbourne. So I'm going to have a whole day with her, and I'm just so looking forward to seeing her and enjoying some special time together. But we've got a bit of a long one, I think it's going to be today. So I think we'll just get started, shall we? So in the last episode, we left off with the toxic pursuer-distancer cycle. Now, we talked about how our libido is fluid, meaning that it fluctuates over time. And for women especially, it can be impacted by so many things. But that it's also really normal for our libido to decrease as well over the course of a long-term relationship, and for men as well. Now, in the pursuer-distancer cycle, the partner with the higher libido uses different strategies, most often negative strategies, to try to get the partner with the lower libido to engage in more sex. But what ends up happening is that the more the pursuer pursues, the more the distancer distances. So they distance themselves both emotionally and sexually. And so then both partners are missing out on the emotional connection and intimacy that they both so want in the relationship. Pursuers often equate sex with love, and they can feel hurt and unloved, rejected, and maybe even feel abandoned emotionally, sexually. This can lead to resentment and hostility. The partner with the lower libido can then feel guilty, punished. They might feel like they've been shut out. And as the cycle goes on, it becomes more and more damaging to the relationship, as you can imagine. And as long as it continues, the distancer has pretty much no chance of improving their libido in those circumstances. So then how do we fix it? How do we both get what we want? As I said in the previous episode, the solution is going to be to communicate. We have to negotiate and find a compromise. This is a team effort. We are a team. It is a relationship problem. He's not to blame. She's not to blame. It's about finding a way to make both partners happy, and there's lots of things that we can do. Now, the first step is to find a way back to each other. We have to find some empathy for each other and practice what's called generosity of intent, meaning that we just have to assume that they have good intentions. They have to assume we have good intentions. At the most basic level, partners don't want to hurt each other. That's not what we signed up for, right? So maybe just by both parties understanding the reality of what's happening, maybe just by knowing that, they can find a way back to each other. That it's human nature for there to be different levels of libido in a relationship. That desire discrepancy is common and it's normal. And so rather than blaming each other, maybe we can find a way to middle ground where both people can be happy. Now, there's going to be situations where the relationship has suffered a lot of damage, enough damage that a relationship counselor might be needed, because before we can make these negotiations for a healthy sexual relationship, the relationship absolutely has to be in a good place. Okay, so let's say the couple has found a way back to each other, and now they're keen to find a way to make sex pleasurable and satisfying for both of them. So where do we go to now? Well, from here, there needs to be an understanding of what generally improves libido. And this is where I come to a really interesting study that I found when I went down a rabbit hole, as I talked about. Love these rabbit holes. I found this study that looks at the things that women think impacts a woman's libido versus what men thinks impacts a woman's libido. Very, very interesting. So this study was published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine in 2021. It's called Women and Men's Perspectives on the Factors Related to Women's Dyadic Sexual Desire and on the Treatment of Hypoactive Sexual Desire Disorder. Authors were Friedman and Quickel. I'm not sure that I said that right, but I did my best. Now, in this study, they had a questionnaire. It had a very long list of items where the people in the study were asked to rate each item on whether it reduces or it increases a woman's desire. They had the option of marking each item from 0, which meant that it didn't reduce or increase it, so it's neutral, to -3 or +3. So from -1 to -3, they thought that that factor reduced a woman's desire. And if they marked it from +1 to +3, then it increased a woman's desire. And so +3 would be the maximum that they could mark as to, how much something increased a woman's desire. Now, the interesting findings. For women in the study, they found that the biggest impact overall on libido was made by 2 factors, and it was a positive impact. These factors were physical attractiveness, so both the feeling of feeling attractive herself and of having an attractive partner or being attracted to their partner. And the other factor was communication. Now, interestingly, these factors for the women were connected. But for the men, they were separate. And not only were they separate, but men did not think that women rated communication or other interpersonal factors, so feeling secure, having meaningful talks, giving attention to each other, as having any major significant impact on a woman's libido. Now, the impact on a woman's libido according to what men thought that stood out from all the others, so the biggest impact that they thought on a woman's libido was actually one that they thought had a significant negative impact. and it was everyday hassles. Now, the authors gave 3 possible theories as to why this might be. They thought that number 1, it could be because their own libido had been reduced by everyday hassles, so they just assumed that that would affect a woman's sexual desire too. Number 2, that men in the study may have had the experience of wanting to have more frequent sex with their partners and thought that it was the daily hassles that frequently got in the way of their partner's sexual desire. Or number 3, that their response was empathic, so giving the idea that they recognize that outside factors can influence a female libido. Now, women also considered imagination and foreplay to be strong positive factors, but again, men ranked these much further down the list. A factor that ranked high for women as having a significant negative impact on libido was having little time together. This didn't even make the list for men. So to sum it up, what I took from this information was that men think that it's mainly the daily, everyday grind of life that most affects a woman's libido and that it impacts it in a negative way. But in reality, for women, yes, daily hassles do impact libido, but more significant impact is from feeling attractive themselves, feeling attracted to their partner, and that these things are likely achieved through having meaningful talks and open communication with their partner. Now, he does have the attracted factor right in that he does rank this reasonably high, but it looks like there's a gap in understanding about what she finds attractive and makes her feel attractive. It seems like this study could be showing us the missing piece of the puzzle. One could theorize that this gap could possibly be closed by the couple prioritizing open communication and meaningful discussion, which is probably not happening in the pursuer-distancer cycle, where they're getting farther and farther apart, where open communication and meaningful, non-judgmental, loving conversations are probably not being had. I think that this study is a reasonable illustration of what is often happening in relationships, which is why I bring it up. Men think that they know what impacts a woman's libido, but maybe they're off the mark. And maybe that's one part of the problem. But also, maybe there isn't open, non-judgmental communication about what is really happening. Okay, so let's go back to how to break the pursuer-distancer cycle. Because it's a learned behavior with a conditioned response, it's going to take some awareness by both parties to identify when they are distancing or when they're pursuing, and making a conscious effort to stop. If it isn't as easy as this, you need to get some help. And there's a couple of options. In her book, Where Did My Libido Go? By Dr. Rosie King, I've mentioned her in the last episode, she goes into detail about how a couple can work together to break the cycle. So that's an option, getting the book and going through those steps. Another option is seeing a relationship counselor. In breaking the cycle, one of the things that needs to stop is something called mercy sex. Mercy sex is also known as duty sex or obligatory sex. It's when you have sex to appease your partner. You don't really want to, and you don't enjoy a second of it. It's sex that's triggered often by feelings of guilt, harassment, or intimidation. The problem with mercy sex is that it's a lose-lose situation. Neither partner walks away feeling satisfied or even feeling very good about the encounter. Now, this is very different from not really wanting to have sex, but wanting to connect or show love or share in pleasure with your partner. This is voluntary sex, where mercy sex is at its basic level involuntary sex. You're kind of doing it against your own will. Now we're going to come back to this again a bit later. Okay, so in breaking the cycle, the name of the game is finding a middle ground. One partner doesn't want it and one does. So how do we find the middle ground? The first step after breaking the pursuer-distancer cycle and eliminating mercy sex is to address any obvious factors working against libido. So number one, as we've discussed, relationship issues absolutely, positively have to be a priority to sort out, because regardless of what other things that you do, if this isn't sorted, it is unlikely your libido, at least for the partner that you do have, is going to improve. Then it's worth looking at any medications you're on to see if they're causing trouble with libido. It's worth having a chat with your doctor if you're on medications. Common culprits would be things like antidepressants, painkillers, and hormonal contraception. But please do not make changes without discussing it with your doctor first and looking for suitable alternatives. If you're struggling with your mood, so depression or anxiety, then that's another reason to see your GP to get these things sorted out. If you're not feeling great about your body, then doing some work there, either with some self-acceptance or instituting regular exercise. Now, exercise just by itself is so powerful in improving the way we feel, both in and about our bodies. And then there's having a look at improving your diet. A body and mind on a healthy, well-balanced diet feels much better than on a diet high in processed foods. If you're drinking more than the recommended amount of alcohol, consider cutting it back. Remember, the recommendation now is no more than 4 standard drinks in a sitting and no more than 10 in a week. If you've got chronic pain, then getting that sorted out. If you have fatigue, then again, looking at diet and exercise. But then optimizing your sleep the best that you can, managing your stress. I've got episodes on both of those things. It's probably worth having a look at. And if you've done all of these things and you're still feeling very fatigued, then it's time to see your doctor to see if there's anything else affecting your energy levels. Now, once you've got those things sorted, all those things that are working against the libido, then it's time to look at all the other things that we can do to improve libido. And this is where the team effort comes in. And I have to emphasize that the strategy has to be consistent and prioritized, meaning the partner can't just do these things when they want to have sex or do them on the random odd occasion. For there to be a positive impact, these things have to become a new way of relating to each other. It's not about doing something to get something. It's about meeting each other's need to connect within the relationship, and she gets this by his communicating with her, spending time with her, making her life a little easier, showing her that he's thinking of her. It's about acknowledging that he gets this need for connection simply by having sex, but for her to want to have sex, she has to first have these connections. Super interesting. And a little annoying that we all can't just be on the same page, but evolutionarily speaking, I'm sure there is some reason the different sexes are wired the way that they are. Okay, so for a woman, things that are likely to improve her libido are things like introducing a little romance. So organizing a dinner out, surprising her with flowers or gifts, giving her a compliment when she's least expecting it, spending some quality time together and making this a real priority, engaging in conversation, opening up lines of communication, giving her affection without expecting that it will lead to sex, and especially in a relationship where the pursuer-distancer cycle has occurred, it's really important to be transparent. I'm not expecting anything. I just know you like it when I rub your back, or we have cuddles, or I rub your feet. Sharing in the home care duties, especially if you don't already. Occasionally making the bed, picking up after yourself, unloading the dishwasher, taking out the bin, whatever. Just making sure that you're doing your part. Now, part of the fun of all of this can be discovering what works and what doesn't. And communicating about this, letting him know without criticism or judgment what's working, what's not working. Having a conversation around what kinds of things that would work best for you is really worth having. Some of these things might not work for you at all, and there might be other things that would. So having a really honest conversation about these things is important. Maybe factoring in a discussion every few weeks, checking in with each other, letting him know how much you appreciate whatever he's doing that's working, that's making you feel loved and special. So giving him some positive reinforcement. And then asking if there are things that you could do to show him love as well, because there might be other things other than sex. Now, as I've said, it usually is the woman who has the lower libido, but it's not always. And so I just want to throw in a few things here that are known to help men, as they are often very different creatures from us. So for a man, things that could improve libido could be things like some kind of visual stimulation, wearing lingerie or some type of erotica, or just plain nudity for some guys. Giving him that look, introducing variety or novelty, being spontaneous or responsive or enthusiastic around a sexual encounter. Letting him know when he's doing something for you sexually that's really bringing you pleasure. Often men very much like to feel like good lovers, and so what better way than letting him know that what he's doing is working for you. Now again, these are just some very broad generalizations, and like with everything else, there are exceptions, so it's worth having the discussion. But based on these common ones, it's easy to see how two people in a relationship trying to entice the other one by using things that work for them probably isn't going to cut it, especially if they are of the opposite sex. We just generally often like some different things. Okay, I think that this is a really good place to finish for today. We've covered what men think women want, what women want, how to address the pursuer-distancer cycle, how to address things that decrease libido, and what we can do to help enhance libido in both men and women. On the next episode, we're going to talk about what to do if we've done all of this and we're still not quite where we want to be in terms of our libido. I hope that this has been really helpful for you. I did get a lot of really good feedback about the last episode. Again, this is something that I see quite frequently in my work as a GP, especially doing the menopause clinics. Libido can become a real problem, can really strain relationships. And I think just by some education and some understanding, we can improve this aspect of the relationship. So I'm hoping that this has all been helpful. It may even be worth listening to the podcast with your partner so that it's not coming just from you. Sometimes that can be helpful. If you found the podcast helpful, please rate it and review it. That just makes it more visible for other people to see it. It's usually pretty easy to rate the podcast. Down at the bottom of the homepage or the episode page, there will be usually a place where you can just pop in a few stars. A 5-star rating is very much appreciated, but some honest feedback in the comments section is helpful as well. By the time that you hear this, it'll be just after New Year's. I hope that you've had a wonderful holiday period, and I hope that you have some very exciting plans over 2025. I certainly do, and one of those is building on this podcast and continuing to improve it and make it the best that I can. Have a great week, everyone, and until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts for medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.